My wife, Regina, looked at me like I'd just suggested we live in a cardboard box. Move, she scoffed, to Wyoming. I am not leaving Los Angeles just so you can play engineer in some boring, dead-end town. I tried to explain. This wasn't just any job. It was a senior project manager position. A massive promotion. But she couldn't see past the zip code. She saw sagebrush. I saw opportunity. I just looked at her and said, I understand. Then I packed my bags and moved alone. It was lonely. It was hard. But months later, when she found out that my boring job at the new energy facility was paying me $250,000 plus bonuses, her entire tune changed. Suddenly, my phone was blowing up with messages about how much she missed US. This is the story of how my wife's refusal to see my worth led to her $250,000 regret. What would you do? Would you follow your partner to the middle of nowhere? Or would you stay in the city you love? Welcome to Inspiration Seeker. If you're ready for the full story and you want to see how this all played out, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button, click like, and comment down below where you're watching from. Your support helps us grow, and I love reading your insights. Now, let's begin. For 8 years, Los Angeles had been our home. But let's be honest, it had become a prison of concrete and crushing traffic. I was a senior engineer at a massive civil engineering firm, but in LA, senior engineer just meant you were senior enough to be blamed for project delays and junior enough to be paid far less than you were actually worth. Every single morning was a soul-crushing 2-hour commute, bumper to bumper on the 405 freeway, just to sit in a gray cubicle designing drainage systems for luxury high-rises I could never, ever afford to live in. I was burned out. My soul was exhausted from the grind. My wife, Regina, felt the exact opposite. For her, LA was the center of the universe. She lived and breathed the lifestyle. Her entire world revolved around weekend brunches in Santa Monica, new gallery openings on Rodeo Drive, and, most importantly, her social media feed. Regina was an influencer, or at least, she was desperately trying to be. Her days were a blur of documenting a life of perceived luxury, a life that was, ironically, funded entirely by the credit cards linked to my boring engineering salary. She didn't see the grind I endured. She only saw the result. She adored the status that came with having an LA zip code, even if that status was built on a fragile mountain of debt. We were drifting apart. It was slow, like a tide going out, but it was undeniable. We were two people living parallel lives under the same roof. My attempts to talk about the future, about saving money, about maybe moving somewhere more affordable, were always met with a dramatic sigh and a condescending lecture. Carl, nobody successful leaves LA, she'd say, her eyes glued to her phone screen. You just need to work harder. Get that big promotion. You're smart, you just need to be more ambitious. She couldn't grasp that ambition in my firm meant sacrificing your entire life, your sleep, and your sanity, just to move one tiny, insignificant rung up the corporate ladder. Then, the email landed in my inbox. It wasn't from my firm. It was from a top-tier recruiter for a new, cutting-edge energy corporation. They were building a revolutionary geothermal power facility in Wyoming. The project was massive, technically complex, and incredibly high-profile within the energy sector. They needed a senior project manager to oversee the entire construction and engineering phase, from the ground up. The location: Kemmerer, Wyoming. A small, remote town known for mining and ranching. I did the interview calls quietly, during my lunch breaks, huddled in my car in the parking garage. The work was incredible. It was a chance to actually build something that mattered, something that would change the power grid, not just another concrete parking garage for millionaires. And then they made the offer. The title was a huge step up. The responsibility was immense. And the salary was $250,000 a year, plus significant performance bonuses and a full relocation package. I just stared at the number on the offer letter. $250,000. It was more than double what I was making. This was pay off all our debt money. This was buy a house with cash money. This was finally breathe money. My hands were literally shaking. This was it. This was the ambition Regina always talked about, just not in the package she expected. I decided to wait until dinner. I even splurged on takeout from her favorite expensive Thai place, the one she always posted photos of. I sat her down, my heart pounding in my chest. I was nervous, but I was optimistic. How could she possibly say no to this? This solved every single one of our problems. Regina, I started, trying to keep my voice even. I have some incredible news. She was scrolling through Instagram, barely listening. Did you finally get that tiny bonus you were hoping for? No, it's bigger than that. I've been offered a new job. That got her attention. She put her phone down, her eyes narrowed. A new job? Where? At that rival firm in Century City. No, I said, taking a deep breath. It's a huge promotion. Senior project manager. They're heading up a massive new energy project. She smiled, and I could see the dollar signs clicking in her eyes. Well, spill it. How much? Where is it? Downtown. It's in Kemmerer, Wyoming. And the salary is $250,000 a year. The smile didn't just fade. It vanished. It dropped off her face like a porcelain mask shattering on the floor. She just stared at me. Then she let out a short, sharp, ugly laugh. Wyoming. Are you kidding me? Wyoming. Regina, this is a huge opportunity. It's $250,000. We could. I don't care if it's $1 million. She snapped, standing up so fast her chair almost fell over. I am not moving to some cow town in the middle of nowhere. My friends are here. My life is here. What am I supposed to do in Wyoming, Carl? Take pictures of tumbleweeds for my feed? It's pathetic. It's a chance to build something, I pleaded, my voice getting quiet. To have a real life. No debt, no 2-hour commute. No, Carl, she said, her voice dropping to an ice-cold whisper. It's career suicide. It's social suicide. I am not going. That is boring. And you are boring for even considering it. She picked up her phone, glanced at the Thai food with disgust, and walked straight into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I was left alone at the table, with the cooling food and the biggest, and now most terrifying decision of my entire life. The slam of that bedroom door was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It wasn't just a door closing. It was a verdict. I was left standing in the living room, surrounded by the cooling, expensive Thai food I'd bought to celebrate. It suddenly smelled sickening. That night, I didn't even try to go into the bedroom. I grabbed a blanket from the hall closet and collapsed onto our stylish, uncomfortable sofa, the one Regina had insisted we buy because it photographed well. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the shadows on the ceiling, replaying her words over and over. Boring. Pathetic. Social suicide. I realized that her entire perception of my worth was tied to our zip code. My skills, my intellect, my new title. None of it mattered because the job wasn't in a place where she could brag about it at brunch. I thought about the 405 freeway, that river of brake lights I sat on for 4 hours every single day. I thought about the crushing burnout, the feeling of designing concrete monuments to wealth I would never possess. And then I thought about $250,000. It wasn't just the money. It was the respect that came with the offer. It was the challenge of the project. It was a lifeline, and she was telling me to let go and drown, just because the water wasn't pretty enough for her. The next morning, the apartment was Arctic. She emerged from the bedroom hours later, dressed in high-end yoga wear, refusing to make eye contact. She slammed the refrigerator door, blended her green smoothie with exaggerated force, and acted as if I was the one who had committed some terrible crime against her. I knew I had one last chance to make her see reason. I waited until she sat down at the kitchen island, already scrolling through her phone. Regina, I said, my voice strained. Please, just look at the project brief. I slid the printed offer letter across the marble countertop. This isn't some backwater maintenance job. This is a multi-million-dollar, state-of-the-art geothermal facility. This is the future of energy. This role, This makes me one of the lead engineers on the entire project." She didn't even glance at the paper. She just held up her hand. "Stop, Carl. Just stop. I don't care if they're building a rocket to Mars. I already told you. I am not leaving Los Angeles. My life is here. My network is here. Everything I've built is here." "What have you built, Regina?" I asked, and the quietness of my own voice surprised me. "What exactly?" Her eyes flashed with fury. "You wouldn't understand. You're happy to just design pipes and disappear. I'm building a brand." "Right. Your brand," I said, nodding slowly. "A brand funded entirely by my boring job." That hit a nerve. She stood up, her face pale with rage. "You know what? You're right. It is about the money. And you're about to make the stupidest financial decision of our lives. So here it is, Carl." She crossed her arms, a gesture of absolute, final authority. "You need to choose. You can have this life with me in Los Angeles. Or you can have that pathetic, dusty job in Wyoming. But you cannot have both. It's me or the job. Decide." There it was. The ultimatum. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her expression was smug, confident. She was holding all the cards, and she knew it. She fully expected me to grovel, to apologize, to tear up the offer letter and beg her forgiveness. She had done this before, in smaller ways, threatening to skip my family's Thanksgiving over a better party, insisting on luxury vacations we couldn't afford. And every single time I had caved. But this time was different. As I stood there looking at the woman I had loved, I suddenly felt nothing. The panic I expected wasn't there. The fear wasn't there. All I felt was a profound, hollow exhaustion. I realized she wasn't just my wife. She was my captor. And she had just handed me the key. I took a deep breath. "Okay," I said. Her smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "Okay. Okay, what?" "Okay, I understand," I said. "I'll take the job." Her face. It was like a mask cracking. "What? Carl? What? You're kidding, right? You're not serious. You're throwing away our marriage." "You're the one who gave the ultimatum, Regina," I said, walking past her toward our bedroom. "I'm just making the choice you offered." But, you'll have nothing," she yelled, following me. "You'll be in the middle of nowhere. You'll be a nobody." "I'd rather be a nobody who's respected," I said, pulling my largest suitcase from the top of the closet, "than a somebody who's treated like an ATM." The next week was a blur of cold, administrative silence. I arranged for the movers. I transferred my half of our joint savings into a new private account. Regina, realizing her bluff had been called, descended into a spiral of alternating rage and theatrical sobbing. She'd scream at me, calling me a fool, a failure, a coward. Then, minutes later, she'd cry, not about losing me, but about how her life was now ruined, how her friends would talk. Not once did she say, "I love you." Not once did she say, "Let's work this out." The day I left, my SUV packed to the brim, she just sat on the couch, staring at her phone, her face a mask of stone-cold fury. "I'm going," I said from the doorway. She didn't look up. "Fine. Have fun playing in the dirt. Don't come crawling back when you realize you've destroyed your life." I looked around the apartment one last time, at all the expensive, meaningless things we'd accumulated. "I won't," I said. I closed the door, got in my truck, and pointed it east toward Wyoming. I didn't look back once. The drive from Los Angeles to Kemmerer took 2 days, but it felt like I was crossing into another dimension. The endless 6-lane parking lot of the I-5 freeway dissolved into the vast empty stretches of Utah and then Wyoming. The sheer scale of the sky was a shock. There was nothing but open space, a silence so profound it was almost loud. When I finally pulled into Kemmerer, my SUV caked in road grime and salt, it was just after dusk. The town was small. Not small by LA standards, but truly small. A few main streets, a couple of traffic lights, and a lot of pickup trucks. The air was so cold it felt like inhaling tiny needles. This was late fall in Wyoming, and winter was already knocking on the door. My company had set me up in a furnished corporate apartment above a real estate office. It was clean, functional, and had all the personality of a hotel room you stay in for one night. Brown couch, brown carpet, generic framed art of a moose. That first night, the silence was deafening. There were no sirens, no helicopters, no traffic, no neighbors screaming. Just the sound of the wind howling outside and the hum of the building's ancient heater. I sat on that stiff couch, my bag still by the door, and a wave of profound, crushing isolation washed over me. I had done it. I had actually done it. I was here. Alone. For a moment, a sharp panic seized me. What if Regina was right? What if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life? That feeling didn't last, mostly because I didn't have time for it. My first day on site was a baptism by ice. The project wasn't just at Kemmerer. It was a 30-minute drive outside of it, down a graded dirt road into a wide, wind-blasted valley. This wasn't an office. It was a war zone of construction. We weren't building a high-rise. We were harnessing the damn planet. This was a geothermal facility, and we were in the most critical, brutal phase, sinking the foundations and drilling the primary wells before the ground froze solid. When I stepped out of my truck at 5:30 a.m., the temperature was 9 degrees. The wind was a physical force, a wall of cold that stole my breath. My office was a double-wide trailer shared with the site foreman, a grizzled man named Mac whose handshake felt like a vice grip. He looked at me in my brand-new, top-of-the-line cold-weather gear and just grunted. "So you're the guy from Ella." There was no warmth, just skepticism. I was the pencil pusher, the manager. The job was a monster. Back in LA, I managed spreadsheets and coordinated with architects over email. Here, I was managing a fleet of heavy machinery, multi-million-dollar drilling components arriving on ice-covered roads, and 3 different crews of rough, tough-as-nails workers who did not care about my degree from UCLA. They cared about whether I could solve the logistics problem of a critical concrete pour that was in danger of freezing before it could set. They cared about whether I was willing to be out there in the sub-zero wind with them, checking the specs on the foundation rebar. My days became a relentless cycle. Up at 4 a.m. On site by 5:30 a.m. 12, sometimes 14 hours of yelling over the roar of excavators, reviewing thermal imaging from the drill heads, and fighting supply chain delays caused by blizzards in the next state. I'd get back to my empty apartment well after dark, my body aching with a physical exhaustion I'd never known. I was too tired to cook, living off frozen dinners and coffee. I'd spend 2 hours reviewing the next day's plans and fall asleep on the couch, still in my work clothes. I barely had time to think about Los Angeles. When I did, it felt like a dream. A distant, brightly lit, shallow dream. My phone, once a constant source of text messages and social media notifications, was silent. I'd look at it before passing out. No missed calls. No texts from Regina. Not even an angry one. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist. And in that frozen, empty apartment, 1,000 miles from everything I'd ever known, it felt like maybe I had. While I was battling frozen mud and 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in Wyoming, Regina, back in LA, was living her best single life. Or at least, that's what she was projecting to the world. I didn't have to guess. I just had to look at her Instagram. In the first 3 weeks I was gone, her feed became a festival, a non-stop celebration of her freedom. There were photos of her and her friends clinking overpriced cocktails at rooftop bars in West Hollywood. There were mirror selfies at her exclusive gym, captioned with things like, "Finally focusing on me again." She even posted a throwback photo of herself on the beach with the vague caption, "Shedding about 180 pounds of dead weight," which I knew was aimed directly at me. To her 15,000 followers, she was an icon of independent womanhood, fresh out of a restrictive relationship. But I knew what they didn't. I knew what the rent on our luxury Brentwood apartment actually cost. I knew what the monthly lease payment on her white Range Rover was. And I knew that the brand she was building generated zero income. It only consumed income. My income. For 8 years, I was the invisible financial engine behind her picture-perfect lifestyle. My boring salary paid for the bottomless brunches, the quarterly Botox appointments, and every designer dress she bought, wore once for a photo, and then left hanging in the closet. I had set up the autopay for every single bill. And on my first morning in Wyoming, before I ever drove out to the project site, I had spent 20 cold, methodical minutes in my corporate apartment, patiently logging in and canceling every single one. The rent, the car insurance, the joint credit card, the utilities, all of it. I had transferred that month's rent, my final month, from my personal account, and that was it. I could picture the moment the first bill came due. I could imagine the look of pure confusion on her face when her card was declined at that $18 smoothie shop. At first, she would have assumed it was a bank error. Then she would have been furious, convinced that I had somehow stolen her money. Right on schedule, in week 4, the first call came. Not from her, of course. It was from our apartment building's property manager. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice clipped and bureaucratic. "We're calling to inform you that this month's rent is now past due. And we've had noise complaints from a party on Tuesday." "I don't live there anymore," I said flatly, looking over a blueprint in my work trailer. "You'll need to speak to Regina. She's the sole occupant now." "Well, she's not answering our calls," the man huffed. "And the card on file was declined." "Not my problem anymore," I said, and for the first time, I hung up on someone from LA and felt a profound wave of relief. 2 days later, the joint credit card was frozen. I knew because I got the automated alert. The bill was maxed out, a feat I'm sure she accomplished with a few post-breakup retail therapy sprees. Back in LA, the walls were closing in. Regina could no longer afford her expensive facade. Her glamorous life was a house of cards built on the foundation of my salary. And I had just pulled the foundation. She must have been panicking. She started selling off some of her vintage designer bags online, pretending on her Instagram stories that she was just clearing out her closet for charity. She stopped posting from expensive restaurants and started posting more inspirational selfies from inside the apartment she was about to be evicted from. She was still too proud to call me. In her mind, I was the loser. I was the one in the middle of nowhere. She was convinced I would fail, that I would hate the job, that I'd come crawling back inside a month, begging to be let back into her fabulous life. All she had to do was wait it out. But I wasn't failing. And I wasn't coming back. Winter in Wyoming isn't just a season. It's an adversary. By December, the world was buried in snow, and the temperature rarely climbed above 0. The work was brutal, relentless, and I was in the thick of it every single day. But something had shifted. I wasn't the LA guy anymore. I was just Carl, the project manager who was out there at 5 a.m. with his boots in the frozen mud, just like everyone else. The change happened, I think, during the incident of the frozen borehole. We were drilling one of the main geothermal wells when a pressure sensor went critical. The slurry mix we were using to keep the drill head lubricated was freezing at a depth we hadn't anticipated, threatening to seize the entire multi-million-dollar drill assembly solid, 2,000 feet underground. Losing that assembly would set the project back 6 months and cost a fortune. Mac, the foreman, was yelling into his radio, the crew was scrambling, and the entire site was on the verge of panic. The old Carl, the LA Carl, would have called a meeting in the warm trailer. He'd have made a spreadsheet. But the new Carl just grabbed a helmet, pulled the thermal data feeds onto a ruggedized tablet, and walked straight onto the drilling platform. The wind was so strong it was trying to rip the tablet from my frozen gloves. I spent 20 minutes with the drill chief, cross-referencing the thermal data with the engineering specs of the slurry. I found the problem, a flaw in the viscosity calculation for this specific temperature and pressure. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It was a math failure. In the middle of that howling blizzard, I ran the new calculations on the spot. Double the glycol in the mix and increase the flow rate by 30% now. I yelled to Mac. It'll thin the mixture and the increased friction will raise the temperature just enough to clear the blockage. Mac looked at me, his face red from the cold, skepticism warring with desperation. If you're wrong, Miller, you're not just seizing the drill. You're gonna blow the seals. I'm not wrong, I said, not with arrogance, but with the simple, exhausted certainty of an engineer who has checked his math. Do it. He stared at me for a hard second, then barked the orders into his radio. For 10 agonizing minutes, the entire site held its breath. We just watched the pressure gauges. They wavered, held, and then slowly, agonizingly, began to drop back into the green. A collective sigh went up from the crew. The drill was safe. I just nodded, my entire body numb from cold and adrenaline, and started walking back to the trailer. As I passed Mac, he stuck out a gloved hand and just said, "Good call, boss." That was it. Boss. Not Miller. Not Ella. After that day, everything was different. The crews didn't just listen to me. They respected me. They'd ask my opinion. Mac even started saving me a seat at the local diner when the senior team went for their weekly breakfast. With the respect came a strange, new feeling. Community. I wasn't just living in that sterile corporate apartment anymore. I started stopping at the Tilted Mug, the only non-chain coffee shop in town, owned by a woman named Sarah. She was the complete opposite of Regina. She wore flannel shirts and hiking boots. Her hair was usually in a practical ponytail, and her smile was genuine. She knew every regular's name and their order. The usual Carl. She'd ask me, "Large black coffee, extra shot, and a bacon burrito?" "You know it, Sarah." "Thanks." We'd chat for a few minutes while the snow fell outside. She asked about the project. She told me about her grandfather, who'd been a miner in that same valley. The conversations were real. Nobody was posturing. Nobody was trying to build a brand or network. We were just two people talking. I started finding a quiet satisfaction in the small-town life. I liked the predictability. I liked the silence. I liked that my worth was measured by my competence and my character, not by the brand of my watch or the location of my apartment. I was calmer. I was sleeping better, despite the long hours. One evening, I was sitting in my truck, watching the snow fall under a streetlight before heading into my apartment. I had just finished a 14-hour day. I was tired, but it was a good tired. And I realized with a jolt that I had not thought about Regina or my old life in almost a week. The thought of LA, of the traffic, the posturing, the endless grinding need to impress. It just made me feel tired. I wasn't the man who had left LA anymore. I was finally, for the first time in my life, becoming myself. Of course, I didn't know any of this at the time. I was completely ignorant of the full-blown collapse happening back in Los Angeles. While I was earning the trust of my crew and finding a quiet rhythm in Kemmerer, Regina's carefully curated world was imploding in the California sun. I pieced it all together much later, from the string of frantic messages and the eventual inevitable gossip that filtered through old mutual acquaintances. The house of cards hadn't just wobbled, it had been leveled. After the Range Rover was repossessed from her friend's curb, a humiliating event she tried to spin as choosing a more sustainable lifestyle, she was formally evicted from the Brentwood apartment. She'd spent the last month couchsurfing, moving between 3 different friends who, one by one, grew tired of her constant drama and her inability to pay her share of, well, anything. Her brand was toxic. She had become the very thing the LA crowd fears most, a cautionary tale. She was broke. Not Ella broke, where you just have to skip brunch, but truly broke. And then came the trigger. The final, desperate catalyst. The UCLA Anderson School of Management Annual Alumni Gala. For Regina, this wasn't just a party. It was the event of the spring. It was the Super Bowl of networking and social posturing. It was the one night a year where her entire social circle, and all her rivals, gathered in one glittering champagne-soaked ballroom to judge each other's success. To be seen, there was to be relevant. To not be seen, that was to be a ghost. It was a public admission of failure. And Regina was not going to fail. The problem was, the tickets alone were $500. Then there was the dress, the hair, the makeup. She needed at least $1,000 fast, just to walk in the door. She had nothing. Her designer bags were long gone, sold on the RealReal for pennies on the dollar. Her friends were now actively avoiding her calls. She was backed into a corner, and a cornered Regina was a dangerous and creative animal. She couldn't just ask me for money. Her pride, the one thing she had left, wouldn't allow it. She couldn't admit that her fabulous single life was a complete sham. She needed a pretext, a Trojan horse. So she constructed her narrative. She'd call me not as a woman in need, but as the benevolent ex-wife calling to check in. She'd be warm. She'd be wistful. She'd apologize for being so harsh before I left. She'd say she'd been thinking about me and just wanted to clear the air, to see if I was okay out there in the middle of nowhere. She would play the part of the mature, reflective friend. And then, after she had softened me up, she'd casually mention the gala. She'd mention how she was invited but was a little short this month because of the transition. She wouldn't even have to ask directly. She'd just let the silence hang there, confident that the old Carl, the Carl who always fixed everything, the Carl who couldn't bear to hear financial stress in her voice, would just sigh and say, "Don't worry about it, Regina. I'll sell it to you." It was a good plan. It was manipulative, it was deeply dishonest, and it was pure Regina. I was in my work trailer, boots kicked up on my desk, going over the pre-drilling schematics for the next phase. It was almost 9 p.m. The site was quiet, buried under a fresh foot of snow, the only sound the hum of the diesel generators. I was exhausted, but I was content. My phone, which I mostly just used for work and as an alarm clock, suddenly buzzed on the table. I glanced at it. The screen was lit up with a name I hadn't seen in nearly 6 months. Regina. My first thought wasn't anger, or sadness, or even curiosity. My first thought, God help me, was just, who? It took me a full second to connect the name to the life I'd left behind. It felt like a ghost was calling me. And, driven by a dull, almost academic curiosity, I picked it up. "Hello," I said, my voice rough from the cold, dry air. "Carl." Her voice was a symphony of forced casualness and fake warmth. "Oh my God," you answered. I'm so glad. I've been thinking about you so much." There was a long, manufactured pause on the other end of the line, a silence so full of static and unspoken calculations it was almost deafening. "Carl," she said, her voice a perfectly rehearsed blend of fragility and warmth. "Oh my God," you answered. I'm so glad. I've been thinking about you so much." I leaned back in my creaking office chair, the metal cold against my back. I didn't say anything. I just waited. The old Carl would have jumped in, filled the silence, asked, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" The new Carl just waited. She stammered, thrown off by my silence. I just wanted to clear the air. I know I was awful before you left, Carl. I was scared. I was stupid. I didn't mean those things I said. I wanted to say I'm sorry." "I appreciate that, Regina," I said. My voice was flat. Not cold, not angry. Just empty. Like a service representative. "I hope you're doing well." I am, she said a little too quickly. "Things are, it's an adjustment. LA is just so expensive when you're on your own, And there it is. I almost smiled. It was the pivot, the setup. "Listen," she continued, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial. "This is so embarrassing whisper. You know the big UCLA alumni gala is next week, right? The big one at the Beverly Hilton." I had no idea. "Well, it's so important for my networking. For my brand. All my contacts will be there. And I'm just a little short for the ticket. It's $500 and with the move and all my new expenses." She let the sentence hang, the implication as heavy and subtle as a brick. She was waiting for me to jump in. "Oh, Regina, don't worry about it. I'll send it to you." I looked out the trailer window at the massive floodlit silhouette of the primary drill rig against the black Wyoming sky. It looked like a monument. "No," I said. The silence on her end was different this time. It wasn't calculated. It was the sound of a system freezing. "What?" What did you just say? I said no, Regina. I can't help you with that. You can't. Her voice immediately lost its warmth, replaced by a sharp, familiar edge of indignation. Or you won't. Carl, it's $500. You're just going to let me. Regina, I interrupted, my voice still quiet, still calm. Our finances are separate. We're not married. I have my own responsibilities here, and you have yours. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Figure it out, she shrieked, the mask completely gone, revealing the raw, desperate panic underneath. I can't believe you. You abandoned me. You left me with nothing. And now you're hoarding your money from your pathetic little job playing in the mud. You are a selfish. I have to go, I said. I have an early meeting. It was interesting to hear from you, Regina. Goodbye. I hung up the phone before she could say another word. I dropped it onto the desk. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel guilt. I felt the last tiny thread connecting me to my old life finally snap. It was done. But for Regina, it was just the beginning. I found this part out later, from a mutual acquaintance she'd apparently cornered at a bar. She was absolutely apoplectic. She threw her phone across her friend's borrowed apartment. How dare I? How dare the loser say no to her? She was desperate. She had to go to that gala. She had one last person to call, an old frenemy from her MBA program named Megan, a woman who worked as a high-level headhunter for the energy and tech sectors. Regina called her, but not for money. She called to complain, to vent, to gather sympathy. Megan, you will not believe the nerve of my ex-husband. Regina apparently cried into the phone. He's become this monster. He completely abandoned me here, left me with all the bills and ran off to God knows. Wyoming. Wyoming. Megan asked, her interest suddenly piqued. Yes. Can you believe it? Regina scoffed. He threw away his entire career to take some boring dead-end job at a power plant in some town I've never even heard of. Kemmerer. He's probably servicing tractors or something, the idiot. And he just refused to send me $500. There was a long, cold pause on Megan's end. Wait a minute, Megan said, her voice changing. What's his name again? Carl Miller. Yeah, why? Carl Miller. From the LA civil firm? That Carl. Yes. Regina said, exasperated. Why does that matter? Megan, the headhunter, let out a short, sharp laugh. It was not a friendly sound. Oh, Regina. My God. You are a moron. What? What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that my firm has been trying to poach anyone from that project for 6 months. That's not a dead-end job, you idiot. That's the Kemmerer geothermal facility. It's one of the highest priority energy projects in the country right now. My firm, we tried to get the lead engineer from that project, and the counteroffer was insane. Regina's blood ran cold. She stopped pacing. What do you mean, insane? I mean, Megan said, clearly enjoying this, that the junior engineers on that site are probably clearing 150. Regina, the senior project manager on that facility? That's not a step down. That's a king-making position. They're not paying him in tractors. That's a $250,000 a year job. Minimum. Plus bonuses. Carl Miller didn't ruin his career. He became one. Regina apparently dropped the phone. The room spun. It wasn't just a job. It wasn't just a promotion. It was $250,000 a year. $250,000. She hadn't just rejected a man. She hadn't just mocked a town. She had laughed in the face of a fortune. I pressed end call and tossed my phone onto the mess of blueprints covering my desk. The silence of the trailer rushed back in, broken only by the howl of the wind outside and the hum of the generator. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 6 months. The last frayed thread that connected me to Regina, to that life, was finally cut. I felt no anger. I felt no regret. I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold, quiet sense of an ending. It was finally, completely over. I stood up, stretching the kinks from my back. 14 hours on site, and now this. All I wanted was to go back to my apartment, take a hot shower, and sleep for a solid 8 hours. I started gathering my papers, shoving blueprints into their tubes, packing my laptop. My phone lay on the desk, a silent black rectangle. I was already thinking about the morning, about the concrete pour scheduled for 7 a.m., about grabbing one of Sarah's bacon burritos on the way in. Then the screen lit up. A ping. It was a text notification. From Regina. I sighed, exasperated. I figured it was a follow-up insult, a digital last word, a string of expletives she didn't get to say before I hung up. I almost swiped it away without looking. But I glanced down. Regina. Carl, wait. I think we were disconnected. I scoffed. Disconnected. Right. I zipped up my backpack. I was done. I wasn't playing this game. Ping. Another text. Regina. Please answer. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just so stressed out and I'm taking it out on you. Please, can we just talk for a minute? I paused, my hand on the doorknob of the trailer. This was a new tactic. The apology was too fast. It was insincere. I ignored it. I turned off the main overhead light, leaving the trailer lit only by the green glow of the server rack. Ping, ping, ping. Suddenly, my phone started vibrating like a trapped animal. A cascade of messages began to pour in, one after another, so fast the notification banners couldn't keep up. Regina. I miss you so much. Regina. I've been such a fool, Carl. A complete, arrogant fool. Regina. I was just looking at our old photos. Remember that trip to Catalina? I was so happy. Regina. I should have gone with you. I see that now. I was just scared. Regina. I am so proud of you. I stopped. I just stood there in the dark, staring at the glowing screen. I read that last message again. I am so proud of you. This was the woman who, not 10 minutes ago, had called my life's work a pathetic little job playing in the mud. This wasn't a change of heart. This was an exorcism. It was unhinged. It was terrifying. What could have possibly happened in the 10 minutes since I hung up on her? Ping. Regina. I'm worried about you. Are you eating okay? I know it's so cold there. I can't stand thinking of you all alone. My blood ran cold. This was a level of manipulation I had never seen. This was a complete 180-degree personality transplant. My phone started ringing. Her name flashed on the screen. I silenced it immediately, my thumb hitting the button with force. I am not getting on this roller coaster. The call stopped, and a second later, a new icon popped up. Voicemail. I was about to delete it to just turn the phone off, but my curiosity. It was a morbid, visceral thing. I tapped the notification. It wasn't a quick message. The audio file was 4 minutes long. I put the phone to my ear. It wasn't her influencer voice. It wasn't her manipulative voice. It was raw, gasping, hysterical sobbing. Carl. Oh my God, Carl, please pick up. Please call me back. She was weeping, catching her breath. I just talked to Megan. Megan Riley. From school. I know. Oh my God, Carl, I know about the job. I know about the money. My hand tightened on the phone. There it was. $250,000, Carl. 250. Oh my God. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe? I thought you were. Oh God, I'm the idiot. I'm the stupidest woman alive. The sobs intensified. You're not a failure, Carl. You're a king. You're amazing. That's so much money. I'm so proud of you, baby. I am so proud of us. The word hit me like a physical blow. I'm packing, Carl, she babbled, her voice thick with tears. I'm packing right now. I don't care about LA. It's stupid. It's shallow. I should be with you. I can get a coat. I don't even mind the cold. I can learn to cook. We can fix this, baby, I know we can. I love you. I've always loved you, I just lost my way. Please, please don't let this be the end. The voicemail clicked off. I stood there in the darkness for a full minute. I felt hollow, sick. The full, transactional, sickening reality of it was laid bare. It was never about me. It was never about my happiness or my career. It was just a number. And she had just found out what it was. Ping. A new text. Regina. Did you get my message? I'm looking at flights. What's the closest airport? Jackson Hole. Or should I fly into Salt Lake? I can be there by tomorrow night, baby. Just tell me where to go. I stood there in the dark trailer, the phone still in my hand, feeling the vibration of that last text message. I can be there by tomorrow night, baby. Baby. The word felt disgusting in my mouth. All the lingering doubt, any microscopic residual guilt I might have felt about leaving, it all evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity that was as pure and unforgiving as the Wyoming winter. It was never about me. It was never about my happiness, my passion for my work, or our life together. It was a simple, brutal transaction. I was a walking, breathing ATM, and my value had just been reassessed. I didn't reply. I didn't text, don't come. I didn't text, it's over. I just pressed and held the power button on the side of the phone. The screen prompted me, power off. I slid my thumb across the glass, and the screen went black. I shoved it deep into my backpack, zipped it up, and walked out of the trailer. I locked the door, got in my truck, and drove back to my apartment, the only sound the crunch of my tires on the packed snow. I took a shower so hot it nearly scalded me, and I fell into bed. For the first time in my life, I slept like I was dead. The next morning, I powered my phone back on. It was a digital explosion. 17 missed calls from Regina. 32 text messages, a chaotic avalanche of I love yous. I'm sorry, what flight should I book? And finally, fine. I'm booking one into Salt Lake. I'll see you tomorrow night, we're going to fix this. I just read them, deleted them all, and then I made one call. I called the main security gate for the project site. Gary, I said, this is Carl Miller. I'm putting a new protocol in place. No personal visitors are allowed on site without my express, in-person authorization. My ex-wife, Regina, may try to show up. She is not to be permitted access under any circumstances. Is that clear? Crystal clear, boss, Gary replied. I didn't hear from her for the rest of the day. The silence was ominous. She was in transit. She arrived 2 days later. It was a Friday evening. The project had just shut down for the weekend after a brutal 60-hour week. I was exhausted. I wasn't in my apartment. I was at the Tilted Mug. It was the only place in town with decent Wi-Fi and strong coffee, and Sarah, the owner, had started keeping it open late on Fridays for the project's senior staff. I was sitting in a corner booth, my laptop open, nursing a coffee and talking to Sarah, who was wiping down the counter. We were just talking. About the weather. About a new shipment of coffee beans. It was simple. It was normal. Then, the bell on the diner door chimed, letting in a swirl of icy wind and fine snow. And there she was. She looked completely and utterly alien. She was wearing a brand new, blindingly white puffy parka that looked like it cost more than my first car. But underneath, she was still wearing LA. Black yoga pants and a pair of totally impractical, high-heeled designer winter boots that were already soaked and stained with road salt. Her hair was a mess, her makeup was running, and her eyes were wide with a kind of frantic, desperate panic. She stood there, shivering, scanning the small diner. Then her eyes locked on me. A tidal wave of theatrical relief washed over her face. "Carl!" she cried out, her voice cracking. Oh my God, baby, I found you. The entire diner, all 6 of us, stopped. Sarah froze, her hand halfway through wiping a table. A couple of old-timers in the next booth lowered their coffee mugs. Regina staggered toward my booth, her heels slipping on the linoleum. Carl, I'm here. I made it. She tried to slide into the booth next to me, bringing with her a cloud of expensive perfume and cold, wet air. God, this place. It was such a horrible drive. I flew into Salt Lake and I rented a car and I think I hit a deer, or maybe it was just a big chunk of ice. But I'm here, baby. I'm here for us. She reached out to grab my hand, which was wrapped around my coffee mug. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't even look surprised. I just looked at her, my expression perfectly, terrifyingly blank. What are you doing here, Regina? I asked. My voice was quiet, but in the tiny, silent diner, it sounded like a gunshot. Her smile faltered. What? What do you mean? I'm here. I'm here for you. For us. I told you I'm sorry. I was wrong, so wrong. I'm ready to be here. I'm ready to support you. We can make this work. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I set the mug down deliberately. You're not here for us, Regina. Yes, I am, she insisted, her voice getting a little too loud. I love you. I don't care about the town. I care about you. No, you don't, I said, my voice still perfectly level. You're here for the money. You're here because you found out what I make. You're here for the $250,000. She recoiled, her face turning pale. That's not true. How can you say that? Okay, I said, nodding slowly. Let's test that. I looked her dead in the eye. I'll ask you one question, Regina, and I want you to answer it honestly. She was trapped. The entire diner was watching. Okay, she whispered. When you talked to your friend Megan, if instead of $250,000, she had told you my boring job in Wyoming paid $25,000 a year, would you be here right now? Her mouth opened. A small, choking sound came out. She had no answer. There was no answer. The mask of the loving, repentant wife dissolved, replaced by the raw, ugly, cornered expression of a gambler who had just lost everything on a final, desperate bet. She was exposed completely and humiliatingly, in front of a room full of strangers. She just stared at me, her eyes filling with a new kind of tear, not of love or loss, but of pure, unadulterated rage. She had been caught. She stared at me, her mouth half open, her face a frozen mask of disbelief. The question hung in the air of that small diner, sucking all the warmth and sound out of the room. If she had told you my job paid $25,000 a year, would you be here right now? The silence stretched. It was a complete, devastating checkmate. Her face, which had been pale with feigned emotion, suddenly flushed a deep, ugly red. The tears of love and regret instantly dried, replaced by the hot, glittering tears of pure, undiluted rage. She didn't just look caught. She looked hunted. How dare you, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. She slowly rose from the booth, her entire body trembling. How dare you humiliate me? In this filthy little hick town. In front of her. She shot a look of pure poison at Sarah, who just stood there calmly, a dish towel in her hand, watching. You think you're so smart? Regina spat, her voice rising. You think you've won something? You're still just boring Carl Miller. You're a glorified construction worker in a flannel shirt. You can hide in the middle of nowhere, Carl, but you'll always be a coward. You'll always be nothing. She grabbed her pristine white handbag from the seat, her movements jerky and furious. You enjoy your precious $250,000 in this frozen hellhole. I hope you choke on it. You'll be miserable here. You'll be all alone. And when you finally realize what you've thrown away, don't you dare come crawling back to me. She was halfway to the door, expecting me to yell, to argue, to follow her. I didn't. I just watched her, my expression calm. I took another sip of my coffee. Crawling back, Regina? I said, my voice cutting cleanly through her tantrum. I'm not the one who just flew 800 miles, rented a car, and drove through a blizzard to a town you despise. She froze, her hand on the door. I'm not the one who came here to beg a man you don't respect, I continued. For a life you don't want, for money you didn't earn. She turned around slowly, her face a mask of pure hatred. I already filed for divorce, Regina, I said, my voice gentle but final. My lawyer sent the papers to your parents' address in San Diego. I wasn't sure where you were living these days. You'll be served next week. That was the blow she couldn't recover from. It wasn't an insult. It was a fact. It was the sound of the last, final door slamming shut and locking. All the rage, all the fight, just deflated. She looked, for the first time, completely and utterly defeated. She didn't have another line. She didn't have another threat. Her face crumpled. Without another word, she shoved the diner door open and stumbled out into the black, windy night. The bell on the door chimed softly as it closed. The diner was silent for a beat. Then, in the corner booth, one of the old-timers cleared his throat and said to his friend, "So anyway, that's why the '89 model's transmission was better." Life resumed. I let out a long, slow breath. It felt like the last molecule of Los Angeles had just been exhaled from my lungs. A shadow fell over my table. I looked up. It was Sarah, the coffee pot in her hand. She wasn't looking at me with pity, or even curiosity. Just a quiet, knowing look. She topped off my mug without me asking. "Rough night, boss?" she asked, her voice calm. I looked down into the black coffee, then back up at her, and a small, genuine, exhausted smile touched my lips for the first time. "You have no idea, Sarah," I said. "But I think it just got a whole lot better." I looked out the window. Regina's rental car, a tiny sedan completely unfit for Wyoming, was fishtailing as she peeled out of the parking lot, her tires spinning uselessly on the ice before finally catching. She was already gone, speeding back to an airport, back to a life of illusions that I no longer belonged to. I was right. I'd rather be a nobody who was respected than a somebody treated like an ATM. And as I sat there, in that warm, quiet diner, in that boring town that now felt more like home than any place ever had, I was finally exactly where I was supposed to be.